They found him in a London hotel room long after midnight, sitting on the floor with his hands trembling and his breath breaking apart. When the door opened, he did not look up. He only said one sentence, quiet and terrified. "It is here for me." Just months earlier, Houston Summers had been on award stages, in packed arenas, on television screens across the world. His voice had carried him from Los Angeles classrooms to global charts, and everyone believed he was only getting started. And his honesty, that sacred, painful, perfect honesty, became the blueprint for every comedian who dared to tell the truth and survive it. He showed America its own reflection, cracked, funny, beautiful, and cruel. And even when the lights went out, the echo of his laughter lingered, not because it was funny, but because it was real. Red Fox didn't just entertain a nation, he held a mirror to it, and he never looked away. The 11th of October, 1991. But in that silent room, with the curtains pulled tight and the walls closing in, fame felt like a distant dream. What filled the air instead was dread, heavy enough to bend him. People think success protects you. But Houston learned that the higher you climb, the more shadows gather beneath your feet. And on that night, he felt those shadows reaching for him, pulling at his faith, his mind, his sense of self, until he could not tell where the fear ended, and he began. He was born in 1983, a year when the music industry was exploding with new sounds, but none of that mattered to him yet. What mattered were the small things. The long walks through his neighborhood, the echo of songs playing from open windows, the feeling that music was not entertainment for him, it was structure, a way to hold himself steady when life felt uncertain. When his family moved to Los Angeles, everything changed. The city had a different pulse, louder and faster, and Houston felt himself pulled toward it like a tide he could not resist. At Alexander Hamilton High School, a place known for shaping artists long before anyone heard their names, he found the first audience that truly listened. He did not rap like the other boys. He did not mimic what was popular. He sang whatever rose in his mind, raw and unpolished, turning hallways into makeshift stages and classrooms into quiet theaters. Teachers stopped to listen. Classmates put down their notebooks. People who had never spoken to him began asking when he would sing again. There is a moment in every artist's life when someone else sees what they cannot yet see in themselves. For Houston, that moment came when the school staff pulled him aside and told him he was different. Not lucky. Not simply talented. Different. The kind of different that does not fade with time. They encouraged him to enter talent shows, and one by one, he won them. It was not the trophies that mattered. It was the growing understanding that maybe the world he imagined on those long childhood walks was within reach after all. His managers came next, drawn by the way his voice carried, not as a performance, but as a confession. One of them decided to record one of his shows on a simple videotape, nothing polished, nothing staged. They sent it to Capitol Records, not expecting much, only hoping someone on the other end would pause long enough to see the boy behind the song. Capitol did more than pause. They watched, they listened, and they called back. For a young man who had not yet learned the weight of his own gift, the contract felt like a doorway opening into a world he had only dreamed of. He imagined late nights in the studio, music built from the ground up, songs that reflected the voice he carried inside him since childhood. Houston entered the industry with hope, with faith, and with a belief that talent alone could protect him from everything that came with success. In those early days, he trusted the process. He trusted the people around him. He trusted that the industry would let him be who he was. But in the background, a different truth was waiting. A truth he could not yet see, but would soon collide with. For now, though, he was still the boy from Los Angeles, with a rising voice, standing at the beginning of a road he thought would lead him only toward the light. When Houston stepped into the doors of Capitol Records for the first time, he believed he was walking into a future shaped by possibility. The building felt enormous, polished, impossible to fully take in. But he carried the same quiet hope he had always carried, the same voice that had lifted him from school hallways to this place where careers were made. For a moment, everything felt right. Then the shaping began. The industry did not ask him who he wanted to be. It told him. They brought in stylists, producers, choreographers, and image consultants, each one holding a piece of the version they wanted him to become. They selected clothes that reflected trends, not identity. They handed him songs written by people he had never met. They encouraged him to move, speak, and present himself in ways that did not feel like home. Houston pushed through it because he believed that every artist had to compromise a little to reach the world. But a small part of him began to dim. The boy who once sang freely now felt the rules tightening around him. Still, he showed up. He worked. He gave everything he had because he wanted the music to matter. And then, the world heard the song. I Like That was released in 2004, a track built with the help of Chingy, Nate Dogg, Ludacris, and I-20. From the first beat, it carried the kind of energy that could move across radios, clubs, and arenas without slowing down. The public embraced it instantly. It climbed to number 3 on the US Billboard Hot R and B Hip Hop Songs chart and broke into the top 11 on the Billboard Hot 100. It crossed oceans, charting in countries like the United Kingdom, Australia, France, Italy, New Zealand, and Switzerland. A young singer who once performed in local talent shows was now being played worldwide. The success did not stop there. McDonald's picked the track for a major commercial, giving the song the kind of visibility artists wait years to find. Houston found himself on television screens, on radio rotations, on playlists that reached millions. His name was no longer just a signature on a high school program. It was a headline. When his debut album, It Is Already Written, was released in August 2004, it pushed his momentum even higher. The album went gold, confirming that the world was not just listening to him, it was rooting for him. Tours followed. Long flights, new countries, unfamiliar hotel rooms that all blended together. Crowds sang his lyrics back to him with a kind of devotion that might have overwhelmed someone who had not been raised on faith and groundedness. But Houston accepted the attention with humility, always trying to stay connected to the boy he used to be. Yet even at the height of all this, there were signs that something was shifting inside him. While the audiences saw a confident young star, those closest to him felt the weight he carried. They noticed the moments when he drifted away, lost in thought. They saw the way he hesitated when discussions turned to image, branding, and appearances. They sensed the tension between who he was and who he was expected to become. The industry had given him fame, but it had also taken something from him, piece by piece, quietly enough that he could not name the loss yet. He was shining, yes, brighter than he had ever imagined. But a shadow had begun to grow behind the light. And shadows, once they appear, rarely stay still. The turning point did not come with a warning. It came quietly, the way storms often do when the sky still looks clear. During the early months of 2005, Houston was touring overseas, carrying the weight of a schedule that left little space for rest and even less space for reflection. London was just another stop on the itinerary, another city blinded by spotlights and long nights. But for Houston, something felt different the moment he arrived. The air was heavier. His thoughts were sharper, darker, harder to control. And the pressure he had managed to keep buried finally began to surface. Those around him noticed the shift first. He seemed distant, speaking in short responses, losing focus mid-conversation. He prayed more often, holding on to faith the way a man holds onto the last steady thing in a room that is starting to tilt. But even prayer felt harder to reach, as if something was standing between him and the comfort he had known since childhood. The night everything collapsed began like any other night on tour. A show, autographs, a late dinner, and then the hotel, quiet and unremarkable, the kind of room an artist barely remembers once they leave. But in that room, Houston felt surrounded by something he believed was not human. He felt watched, followed, targeted. Accounts from those with him say he started speaking about a presence he could not escape, a pressure that tightened around his mind until reason began to slip away. He paced. He prayed. He wept. He begged for the feeling to stop. And then, when he could no longer bear the fear, he made a desperate attempt to escape through the hotel window. His team stopped him just in time, pulling him back from the edge. Shaken and terrified, they placed him in a first-floor room to keep him safe, believing the worst had passed. But the worst was still inside him. Alone in that room, Houston fell into a state beyond panic, beyond confusion. Something in him broke open, and in that break, he believed he had one mission: to free himself from whatever he thought was holding him. It was then that he did the unthinkable. With a plastic fork, he gouged out his left eye. When his bodyguard checked on him, the quiet in the room was unnatural. He saw blood on the floor. He saw Houston lying perfectly still with a towel pressed to his face. And when he lifted the towel, the truth revealed itself in a way no one in that room would ever forget. Houston whispered that he had to get the devil off his back, that this was the only way to stop it. To end the battle, he believed he had been fighting long before that night. The London police arrested him shortly after, not out of anger, but because there was no other way to protect him. He spent 2 weeks in rehab, trapped not by walls, but by the realization that his mind had taken him to a place he could never return from unchanged. When he finally went home to Los Angeles, he apologized to fans, to his family, to anyone who had ever believed in him. He said the industry had tried to push him into things that violated the values he was raised with. He said danger had come not from fame itself, but from the people and forces around it. He said he needed to step away before he lost anything more than his sight. And so the boy, who once stood on international stages, walked away from it all, carrying a wound the world would talk about, but never fully understand. In the months that followed Houston's collapse, the world tried to make sense of what had happened to a young star who once seemed destined for a long, bright career. But the explanations came slowly, filtered through headlines, interviews, and speculation that never fully captured the weight of his experience. In the United States, his story became a quiet, cautionary tale. People who had followed his rise looked at the industry with sharper eyes, questioning what kind of pressure could drive a young artist to harm himself so violently. Mental health advocates spoke about the hidden cracks beneath celebrity culture, about the silent battles many performers endure while the public assumes they are thriving. To them, Houston was not a tragedy, but a reminder of the cost of ignoring the mind in pursuit of success. Religious communities saw something different. They heard his statements about spiritual warfare, about forces he believed were trying to break him, and they took those words seriously. They saw a young man raised on faith entering an industry that often demanded image over conviction, obedience over authenticity. Some believed he had tried to protect his soul in the only way he understood at the time, however extreme the act had been. His story echoed through churches, small groups, and prayer circles with a mix of sorrow and fear. In London, where the incident unfolded, the reaction was sharper, more immediate. The police reports described the scene with clinical clarity, but the public read between the lines, sensing the depth of his suffering. International news outlets covered the story with a tone of disbelief, focusing on the shocking nature of the event rather than the man behind it. Across Europe, many saw his collapse as a symbol of the relentless pace of global fame, the way it can lift and destroy with equal force. Years later, when Houston stepped away from the music world entirely and began speaking about violence in the prison system, a different kind of respect emerged. He launched a campaign to fight sexual assault behind bars, pushing for dignity for men who had no voice. Some found it unexpected, even strange, but others understood it as the evolution of someone who had once felt powerless and refused to let others feel the same. In America, especially, people recognized the courage it took to return to the public eye after such a devastating fall. They may not have understood the depths of his pain, but they understood resilience. They understood the long road back from a moment that could have ended a life. And in that understanding, they saw Houston not as a broken figure, but as a man who had survived the kind of darkness most people never face. In the years after Houston stepped away from the spotlight, his name faded from the charts, but not from the memories of those who had watched his rise with hope. He no longer stood beneath the heat of stage lights or heard his voice echo across arenas. Instead, he lived quietly, rebuilding himself piece by fragile piece, learning how to carry the past without letting it crush him. Some stories end with triumph. Some end with downfall. Houston's story settles somewhere in between, in a place where survival itself becomes a form of victory. He did not return to reclaim fame, and he did not chase the applause he once believed would define him. What he pursued instead was something more human, something steadier than fame, clarity, purpose, and a way to give the world what he still had left. When he began speaking about violence in prisons, many were surprised. But those who looked closely understood that he was drawn to the forgotten, the wounded, the silenced. He knew what it felt like to be overwhelmed by forces larger than himself. He knew how it felt when a mind collapses under pressure and no one hears the quiet cries beneath the noise. His campaign was not born from politics. It was born from recognition, the recognition of pain and the desire to stop it where he could. In the American consciousness, Houston's name lives as a reminder that success does not guarantee safety, that fame is not armor, and that the human mind can fracture even in the brightest rooms. People who hear his story today do not speak only about his fall. They speak about the courage it took to walk away, the honesty it took to admit he had broken, and the strength it took to keep living after the world misunderstood what he endured. Some stories end without closure, but dignity does not need applause. Houston reclaimed his life not by returning to who he once was, but by accepting who he had become, a survivor, a witness, a man who stepped out of the light so he could find something truer in the dark. And for anyone who has ever stood alone in a moment that threatened to break them, his story offers a quiet truth. You do not have to rise the way others expect. You only have to stand in the way that keeps your soul intact. If this journey reminds you of someone you know, or of a moment you carried alone, share it. Someone out there might need the reminder that survival itself is a form of strength.